Commander Zarathul watched the viewport with growing amazement as the small human fighter weaved through the asteroid field like a dancing flame. The pilot's movements were impossible, defying every known law of physics and tactical doctrine taught in the Imperial Naval Academy. Where seasoned Valorian pilots would need careful calculation and precise timing, this human seemed to move on pure instinct. "How is he doing that?" whispered Flight Leader Kexnan, his four eyes wide with disbelief. The human's ship twisted through gaps that should have been fatal, executed turns that would have liquefied any other species, and maintained speeds that made veteran pilots nervous just watching. The human pilot's voice crackled through the communications array, calm and almost bored. "Asteroid field cleared, Commander. Navigation route established. Ready for fleet passage." There was no pride in his tone, no acknowledgement of the spectacular display they had just witnessed. To him, it seemed routine. Zarathul had served in the Galactic Empire's navy for 30 cycles, commanding fleets that spanned star systems. She had seen the best pilots from dozens of species, each bringing their unique abilities to the Imperial cause. The crystalline Shardai with their perfect mathematical precision, the gaseous Netherans who could think in 11 dimensions, the mechanical Corvex with their flawless reaction times. But this human, this Jake Morrison, made them all look like Academy cadets on their first training flight. The Empire had discovered humanity 3 months ago, a young species barely reaching beyond their own solar system. Initial contact protocols suggested they were primitive, aggressive, and largely irrelevant to galactic affairs. Their technology was crude, their society chaotic, and their military tactics seemed to rely more on luck than strategy. Most Imperial analysts recommended minimal contact, perhaps some basic trade agreements in a few centuries when they became more civilized. But then reports started filtering in from the Outer Rim territories. Human mercenaries and explorers who had somehow acquired interstellar travel were making names for themselves in ways that defied explanation. They took contracts that seasoned professionals refused, survived situations that should have been certain death, and accomplished objectives that military strategists deemed impossible. Jake Morrison had been one of these independents, working the dangerous shipping routes through pirate-controlled space. When Imperial recruiters first approached him, they expected the usual negotiations about pay, benefits, and posting assignments. Instead, Jake had simply asked when he could start and where he needed to report. No questions about the Empire's structure, no concerns about leaving human space, no demands for special accommodations. He just wanted to fly. The recruitment board had been skeptical. Humans were untested. Their psychological profiles suggested potential instability, and their lack of formal military training was concerning. But the Empire was facing increasing threats along its borders, and skilled pilots were always in demand. They decided to give him a chance, assigning him to Zarathul's scout division for evaluation. That evaluation period should have lasted 6 months. Instead, after just 3 weeks, Zarathul found herself recommending Jake for immediate promotion to elite status. His performance in training simulations had broken every existing record. His tactical assessments were unconventional but devastatingly effective. His ability to operate under stress made him seem almost superhuman. The asteroid field navigation they had just witnessed was supposed to be his final test before full squadron integration. The field was considered moderately dangerous, requiring careful planning and steady nerves. Most pilots took 2 hours to find a safe passage for fleet movement. Jake had done it in 23 minutes, mapping a route that actually improved on the computer's optimal path calculations. "Sir," Communications Officer Veltar spoke up from his station, "we're receiving priority transmission from Imperial Command. Admiral Thexvar wants immediate debrief on the human pilot's performance." Zarathul nodded, still staring at Jake's fighter as it held position at the edge of the asteroid field. The small craft looked almost fragile compared to the massive Imperial vessels. But she was beginning to understand that appearances could be deceiving when it came to humans. "Tell the Admiral that Pilot Morrison has exceeded all expectations," she said finally. "Recommend immediate transfer to First Fleet operations." As the communication was transmitted, Zarathul couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something significant. The Empire had absorbed thousands of species over its long history, each contributing their strengths to the greater whole. But humans seemed different. They didn't just bring skills or knowledge. They brought something indefinable that changed the very nature of what was possible. Jake's fighter began moving again, executing a casual loop that brought him alongside the command ship. Through the transparent cockpit, Zarathul could see him clearly for the first time. He looked young by human standards, relaxed in his pilot's chair, hands moving over controls with practiced ease. There was nothing intimidating about his appearance, nothing that suggested the incredible abilities they had just witnessed. "Pilot Morrison," she spoke into the communication array. "Report to Briefing Room 7 upon docking. Command wants a full mission analysis." "Copy that, Commander," came the reply. "Should I include the part where I had to slow down so your sensors could keep track of me?" The bridge fell silent. It took Zarathul a moment to realize that the human was making a joke. The fact that it might also be true made it less amusing than it should have been. As Jake's fighter moved toward the docking bay, Zarathul began composing her report to Imperial Command. How do you explain to bureaucrats and admirals that everything they thought they knew about the limitations of organic pilots might be wrong? How do you describe watching someone do the impossible as if it were routine? The Empire was about to discover that bringing humans into their fold might be the best decision they had ever made. Unfortunately for everyone involved, they were also about to learn that humanity's gifts came with complications that no one could have anticipated. Admiral Thexavar reviewed Jake Morrison's file for the 5th time, his scaled fingers drumming against the polished surface of his command desk. The human's performance metrics were extraordinary, almost unbelievable. 0 mission failures, response times that broke every established record, and tactical innovations that were being studied by the Empire's best strategists. In just 6 months of active service, Jake had become something of a legend among Imperial forces. The Admiral's office overlooked the sprawling Imperial Naval Academy on Corvallis Prime, where the finest pilots from across the galaxy came to train. Through the massive windows he could see training squadrons practicing formation flying, their movements precise and coordinated. These were the elite, the top 1% of their respective species, yet none of them could match what this single human accomplished on a routine basis. "Enter," he called as his door chimed. Jake Morrison walked in, his uniform crisp and properly worn, though he moved with a casual confidence that never quite fit Imperial protocols. The human snapped off a regulation salute, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he found the formality mildly amusing. "You requested to see me, Admiral?" Jake's voice carried that same calm tone that had become his trademark. Whether he was reporting successful completion of an impossible mission or discussing lunch plans, he never seemed particularly excited or concerned about anything. "Sit down, Morrison." Thexavar gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I've been reviewing your recent missions. The raid on the Terminus station was particularly impressive." Jake settled into the chair with fluid grace. "Thank you, sir. Though I should mention the intelligence was off. They had twice as many defensive platforms as reported. Yes, I saw that in your debrief. Most pilots would have aborted the mission." Thexavar leaned forward. "You destroyed 37 enemy fighters and disabled 6 capital ships, single-handedly." "The tactical situation allowed for it," Jake replied with a slight shrug. "Their formation patterns were predictable once I understood their command structure." This was exactly what puzzled Thexavar about humans, about Jake in particular. The accomplishment should have been impossible, yet Jake discussed it like commenting on the weather. There was no boasting, no false modesty, just a simple statement of fact. "Morrison, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I want an honest answer." The Admiral's voice took on a more serious tone. "How many enemy combatants would you estimate you've eliminated during your service with the Empire?" Jake was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You mean total kills, sir? Ships destroyed or actual body count?" "Both. Ship kills are easy to track. The computer logs everything automatically." Jake accessed his wrist communicator, scrolling through data. 437 confirmed vessel destructions, ranging from single-pilot fighters to destroyer-class warships. Thexavar felt his breathing slow. Those numbers represented more enemy vessels than most entire squadrons eliminated in their operational lifetime. "And the other number?" Jake's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. "That's harder to calculate, sir. Depends on crew sizes, survival rates from ship destructions, ground operations where individual targeting was required." He paused, running quick calculations. Conservative estimate would be around 15,000. Could be higher. The silence in the room stretched uncomfortably. Thexvar had commanded fleets in major campaigns, had overseen battles that decided the fate of star systems. He understood the mathematics of warfare, the cold reality that victory often meant large numbers of enemy casualties. But hearing those numbers from a single pilot, delivered in the same tone someone might use to discuss lunch plans, was deeply unsettling. Morrison, do those numbers concern you at all? Should they, sir? Jake's question seemed genuine. Every engagement was authorized by Imperial Command. Every target was confirmed hostile. Rules of engagement were followed in all cases. He tilted his head slightly. Is there some issue with my performance? No issue with performance, Thexvar said quickly. Your service record is exemplary. It's just that most species take some time to adjust to the realities of combat operations. There's usually some psychological processing involved. Jake nodded as if understanding. You're asking about trauma responses, stress reactions, that sort of thing. Exactly. Sir, with respect, I think there might be some misunderstanding about human psychology. Jake leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more educational than defensive. What you call adjustment to combat realities assumes that violence is somehow foreign to our nature. It isn't. Thexvar felt a chill run down his spine. Explain. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a death world, Admiral. We're built for violence in ways that most galactic species aren't. Our entire civilization was forged through conflict. Every major advancement in our history came from war, competition, or survival pressure. Jake's voice remained calm, almost clinical. The Empire sees combat as something that requires special training and psychological preparation. For humans, it's just Tuesday. The Admiral realized he was gripping his desk hard enough that his claws were leaving marks in the metal surface. Morrison, are you saying that killing comes naturally to your species? Not exactly, Jake corrected. Killing is just one tool among many. What comes naturally is winning. Humans are extremely good at identifying threats and neutralizing them efficiently. Sometimes that means negotiation. Sometimes it means superior technology. Sometimes it means pure violence. We use whatever works. And the psychological cost? Jake was quiet for a longer moment this time. There's always a cost, sir. But humans are also extremely good at carrying costs. We're built for it. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, natural disasters, and each other for millions of years. What doesn't kill us literally makes us stronger. Thexvar stood and walked to his window, looking out at the training formations below. The Empire had always prided itself on being a meritocracy, promoting beings based on ability rather than species or origin. But they had also assumed that certain psychological frameworks were universal, that all sentient species would respond to violence and loss in similar ways. Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you. Some members of Command are becoming concerned about human integration into Imperial forces. Your success rate is so far beyond norm that it's raising questions. What kind of questions, sir? Questions about human motivations, about long-term loyalty, about what happens when a species that's built for violence decides that the Empire is no longer the winning side. Jake stood as well, moving to join the Admiral at the window. For a moment, they watched the training flights in comfortable silence. When Jake spoke again, his voice carried a new quality, something deeper and more serious than his usual casual tone. Admiral, humans don't change sides because we're afraid of losing. We change sides when we realize we're fighting for the wrong reasons. He paused. As long as the Empire stands for something worth protecting, you'll have our loyalty. But if you ever become something that needs to be stopped... He left the sentence unfinished. Thexvar understood the implication perfectly. The Empire had gained a powerful ally in humanity, but they had also introduced a variable they didn't fully understand. Jake Morrison wasn't just an exceptionally skilled pilot. He was a representative of a species that might be fundamentally different from everything the Empire had encountered before. Understood. Morrison, dismissed. As Jake left the office, Thexvar returned to his desk and began composing a classified report to the Imperial Council. They needed to know what they were dealing with, and they needed to know soon. The Imperial Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Thexvar finished reading his classified report. The circular room, with its representatives from dozens of species, had heard disturbing intelligence before, but nothing quite like this. Chancellor Mordeth, The ancient Etherian who had guided the Empire for over 2 centuries leaned forward in his floating meditation sphere. "Admiral, let me ensure I understand your assessment correctly." The Chancellor's telepathic voice echoed in every mind present. "You believe that humans represent a significant strategic advantage for the Empire, but also a potential existential threat?" "That is correct, Chancellor." Thexvar stood at attention in the center of the chamber. Pilot Morrison's combat effectiveness is beyond anything in our historical records. However, his psychological profile suggests that human loyalty is conditional in ways we may not have anticipated. Counselor Vexhai, representing the insectoid Kithara collective, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "The humans' kill count alone exceeds that of our most decorated veterans. Are we certain these numbers are accurate?" "Verified through multiple independent sources," Thexvar confirmed. "Morrison's performance has been witnessed by hundreds of Imperial personnel. The numbers are conservative, if anything. And he shows no signs of combat stress? No psychological deterioration?" This question came from Dr. Zelmtar, the Empire's chief xenopsychologist. "None whatsoever. If anything, extended combat seems to improve his performance. Each engagement makes him more efficient, more deadly." Thexvar paused. "It's as if violence is a natural environment for his species." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The Empire had built its strength through integration, bringing together the unique advantages of different species. But they had always assumed that sapient beings shared certain fundamental psychological frameworks. The idea that an entire species might be naturally suited for warfare was unprecedented. Chancellor Mordeth raised a translucent appendage for silence. "Have we conducted broader studies of human psychology? Is Morrison representative of his species? Limited data suggest he may actually be typical rather than exceptional," Thexvar replied. "Intelligence reports from human space indicate that their entire civilization has been shaped by constant conflict. They have never experienced a generation without war somewhere on their planet." Counselor Rethanar of the peaceful Luminar commune spoke up, his melodious voice tinged with concern. "If humans are naturally violent, why did they accept integration so readily? What prevents them from viewing the Empire as just another target?" This was the question that had been keeping Thexvar awake at night. According to Morrison, humans don't fight for the sake of fighting. They fight to win, and they define winning as protecting what they value. Currently, they seem to value the stability and protection the Empire provides. "Currently," repeated Counselor Vexhai ominously. "There's something else," Thexvar continued. "In my interview with Morrison, he made an implicit threat. He suggested that human loyalty would continue as long as the Empire remained worth protecting, but implied that if the Empire ever became something that needed to be stopped, humans would act accordingly." The chamber fell silent again. The implication was clear. Humanity might be the Empire's greatest asset or its greatest threat, depending entirely on human perception of Imperial behavior. Dr. Zelmtar accessed his data tablet. "I've been reviewing available information about human history and psychology. Their development patterns are unlike anything in our xenological databases. Most species develop civilization through cooperation and mutual benefit. Humans seem to have developed through competition and conflict resolution." "Explain," Chancellor Mordeth commanded. "Their technological advancement accelerated during periods of warfare. Their greatest achievements in engineering, medicine, and space exploration emerged from military necessity. They appear to be a species that thrives under pressure and performs best when facing existential challenges." Counselor Rethanar shook his head in dismay. "This sounds like a species of natural-born soldiers. How did they achieve interstellar travel without destroying themselves?" "That's perhaps the most significant data point," Dr. Zelmatar continued. "They did nearly destroy themselves multiple times, but they also developed unprecedented cooperation mechanisms. When faced with truly existential threats, humans can coordinate on a global scale with remarkable efficiency." Admiral Thexvar nodded. "Morrison mentioned something similar. He said humans are extremely good at identifying and neutralizing threats. The key word is identifying. They seem capable of distinguishing between competitive challenges and genuine threats to survival. And how do they treat those genuine threats?" asked Chancellor Mordeth. "Complete annihilation," Thexvar replied quietly. "According to their history, when humans identify something as a true existential threat, they don't seek balance or negotiation. They seek total victory. The weight of this revelation settled over the council chamber. The Empire had always operated on principles of managed conflict and negotiated resolution. The idea of a species that approached threats with such absolute determination was both appealing and terrifying. Councillor Vexhai spoke what many were thinking. If humans ever decide that the Empire itself is a threat to their survival, then we would face an enemy unlike anything in galactic history, Thexvar finished. A species with no psychological barriers to violence, superior tactical instincts, and the ability to coordinate globally when threatened. Chancellor Mordeth was quiet for several minutes, his ancient mind processing the implications. Finally he spoke. Recommendations, Admiral? Continue integration, but with careful monitoring. Humans are currently our greatest asset in dealing with the Vorthan rebellion and pirate activities along the Rim. Their capabilities are too valuable to waste. Texvar paused. But we need to ensure that the Empire never gives them reason to view us as a threat. Elaborate. No oppression of human colonies. No restriction of human freedoms beyond standard Imperial law. No actions that could be interpreted as preparing to eliminate humanity as a threat. Thexvar looked around the chamber. And perhaps most importantly, we need to remember that humans don't fear stronger opponents. If they ever decide we're enemies, they won't be intimidated by our superior numbers or technology. Dr. Zelmtar added, I recommend expanded psychological studies of human personnel. We need to understand their motivational frameworks better, and we should probably prepare contingency plans. What kind of contingency plans? Asked Councillor Rethnar. Plans for if humans ever decide that the Empire needs to be stopped, Dr. Zelmatar said grimly. Because based on everything we know about their capabilities and psychology, traditional military responses might not be sufficient. Chancellor Mordeth's telepathic voice carried a new weight when he spoke again. The Empire has survived for millennia by adapting to new challenges and integrating new strengths. Humanity represents both our greatest opportunity for growth and our greatest test of wisdom. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives of dozens of species who had found peace and prosperity under Imperial protection. We will proceed with integration, but with the understanding that we are no longer dealing with subjects or allies in the traditional sense. We are dealing with partners who could become our greatest protectors or our most dangerous enemies, depending entirely on our own actions. The meeting was classified at the highest levels, but word of humanity's true nature began to spread through Imperial intelligence networks. Jake Morrison continued his missions, unaware that his honest answers to a simple question had fundamentally changed how the galaxy's most powerful civilization viewed his entire species. Captain Elena Vasquez materialized in the transporter bay of the Imperial dreadnought Eternal Glory, her combat armor still smoking from the planetary assault she had just completed. Around her, the familiar hum of Imperial technology provided a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind on Kepler 7th. The rebellion there had been crushed in just 6 hours, a time frame that had shocked even her Imperial commanders. Captain Vasquez, report to Admiral Korthal immediately, announced the ship's communication system. Elena removed her helmet, revealing a face that showed no sign of the brutal combat she had just endured. Her dark eyes were calm, focused, carrying the same unsettling composure that had become associated with human soldiers throughout the Empire. As she walked through the corridors of the massive ship, crew members from various species stepped aside respectfully. In the 8 months since Jake Morrison's evaluation, dozens of humans had been integrated into Imperial forces. Each one had proven devastatingly effective in their assigned roles, but their collective performance was beginning to worry Imperial Command in ways they hadn't anticipated. Admiral Korthal, a massive Thurian with crystalline formations growing from his shoulders, looked up as Elena entered his command center. His species was known for their tactical brilliance and unshakable nerves, but even he seemed uncomfortable as he reviewed the mission reports. Captain, your ground assault was successful beyond projections, he began carefully. The rebel stronghold was estimated to require a full division and 2 weeks of siege operations. You accomplished the objective with a single squad in under 6 hours. The intelligence was accurate, sir. Once we identified their command structure and supply lines, the tactical solution was straightforward. Elena's response carried the same matter-of-fact tone that had become characteristic of human military personnel. Straightforward, the Admiral repeated slowly. Captain, you eliminated 3,000 rebel fighters while suffering 0 casualties among your team. Yes, sir. How? Elena tilted her head slightly as if the question surprised her. Standard human small unit tactics, sir. We identified their defensive positions, eliminated their leadership through precision strikes, disrupted their communication networks, and then systematically cleared each sector. The rebels fought bravely, but their tactical doctrine wasn't designed to counter human operational methods. Admiral Korthal accessed his holographic display, showing the battlefield analysis. Captain, according to our sensors, your squad moved through the enemy stronghold like they knew exactly where every defender would be positioned. Not exactly, sir, but close. Humans are pattern recognition specialists. After the first few engagements, we understood how they thought, how they would react to pressure, where they would position backup forces. Elena pointed to specific locations on the tactical map. Once you understand an enemy's psychology, their actions become predictable. And if they had adapted, changed their tactics mid-battle, then we would have adapted faster. Elena replied without hesitation. Humans are extremely good at real-time tactical adjustment. We don't commit to rigid battle plans. The Admiral studied the young human officer. She was smaller than most species in the Imperial military, carried lighter weapons, and had no obvious physical advantages. Yet she had accomplished something that seasoned Imperial forces would have found challenging, with overwhelming numerical superiority. Captain, I'm going to ask you the same question that Admiral Thexvar asked Pilot Morrison several months ago. Korthal's voice became more serious. What is your estimated kill count since joining Imperial forces? Elena was quiet for a moment, accessing her personal combat logs. Direct kills are approximately 423 confirmed. Indirect kills through tactical decisions that led to enemy casualties would be significantly higher. Probably around 2,000 in 8 months of service. Yes, sir. And you feel no psychological stress from these numbers? Elena's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been confusion. Sir, are you asking if I feel guilty about defending Imperial territory and protecting Imperial citizens from hostile forces? I'm asking if the reality of taking so many lives affects you psychologically. Oh. Elena nodded in understanding. You're concerned about trauma responses. Sir, I think there may be some misunderstanding about how humans process combat stress. Admiral Korthal leaned forward. Explain. Humans don't develop trauma from violence itself, sir. We develop trauma from helplessness, from being unable to protect what we value, from failing in our duties. Elena's voice took on a more educational tone. Combat stress occurs when humans are forced into situations where they cannot effectively respond to threats. When we can fight back, when we can protect our people, when we can accomplish our mission objectives, the psychological impact is minimal. You're saying that successful violence doesn't traumatize humans? Not exactly. It's more that humans find purpose in effective action. When violence serves a clear protective function and achieves positive results, it aligns with our psychological programming, rather than conflicting with it. The Admiral felt the same chill that Admiral Thexvar had experienced months earlier. Captain, you're describing your species as if violence is psychologically healthy for you. In the right context, it can be, Elena replied honestly. Humans evolved to be protectors. We're biologically and psychologically designed to stand between threats and the people we care about. When we're fulfilling that function effectively, we experience satisfaction rather than trauma. Admiral Korthal stood and began pacing, his crystalline formations catching the light from the command center displays. Captain, what happens when humans are not fighting? When there are no threats to respond to? Then we get restless, Elena answered immediately. We start looking for challenges, problems to solve, ways to improve our situation. Humans don't do well with extended periods of peace and stability. That's concerning. It doesn't have to be, sir. The challenges don't have to be violent ones. Humans can channel that drive into exploration, research, construction, competition. We just need something to push against, some way to test ourselves. The Admiral stopped pacing and looked directly at Elena. And if humans decide that the Empire itself is the challenge that needs to be pushed against? Elena was quiet for a much longer time, her expression becoming more serious. When she spoke, her voice carried a new weight. Sir, that would depend entirely on whether the Empire was acting as a protector or as a threat. Elaborate. Humans evaluate institutions based on their function, not their power or tradition. If the Empire protects innocent people, maintains justice, and allows for growth and improvement, then humans will support it indefinitely. Elena paused. But if the Empire becomes oppressive, exploitative, or destructive to the things humans value, then it would be seen as a problem that needs to be solved. And how do humans solve problems they can't negotiate with? The same way we solve any existential threat, sir. Completely and permanently. Admiral Korthal realized he was looking at a perfect example of why the Imperial Council had become so concerned about human integration. Elena Vasquez appeared to be a loyal, effective Imperial officer. But underneath that loyalty was a species-level commitment to principles that superseded any political allegiance. Captain, if you ever received orders that you believed were morally wrong, what would you do? I would refuse the orders, sir. And if those orders came from the highest levels of Imperial command, then I would have to conclude that Imperial command had been compromised or corrupted, and I would act accordingly. Even if it meant fighting the entire Imperial military. Elena's answer came without hesitation. If the Imperial military was being used to harm innocent people, then yes, sir. That would be exactly what humans are designed to prevent. The Admiral understood now why the Council meetings about humanity had become so frequent and so classified. The Empire had not simply recruited skilled soldiers. They had allied themselves with a species that would support them completely, as long as they remained worthy of that support, but would become implacable enemies the moment they failed that test. Thank you for your honesty. Captain, dismissed. As Elena left the command center, Admiral Korthal began composing another classified report to Imperial Command. The pattern was becoming clear across all human personnel. Exceptional loyalty, devastating effectiveness, and an underlying moral framework that could not be compromised or overridden by political authority. The Empire had gained the ultimate protectors, but they had also accepted the ultimate judges of their own actions. Director Quental of Imperial Intelligence stood before the massive holographic display in the classified briefing room, watching as data streams from across the galaxy painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Red markers indicated human personnel locations throughout Imperial space, and the pattern they formed was unlike anything in the Empire's intelligence archives. How many now? Asked Deputy Director Zorthak, his tentacles nervously coiling around his data tablet. 2,347 confirmed human personnel integrated into Imperial forces, Quental replied, and that number increases daily. The holographic display zoomed in on specific sectors, highlighting mission success rates that defied statistical probability. Every operation involving human personnel showed the same pattern. Objectives achieved ahead of schedule, casualties minimized, enemy forces eliminated with unprecedented efficiency. The recruitment rate is accelerating, Zorthak observed. Word about human effectiveness has spread through the military hierarchy. Every commander wants humans assigned to their operations. That's the problem, Quental said grimly. We're not just recruiting individuals anymore. We're building a network of the most dangerous beings in galactic history, and we're giving them access to Imperial resources, intelligence, and infrastructure. The display shifted to show communication patterns between human personnel. Unlike other species who tended to maintain professional relationships within their immediate units, humans had begun establishing connections across vast distances and organizational boundaries. They shared tactical information, coordinated training exercises, and maintained constant awareness of each other's operational status. Sir, intelligence analyst Morgeth spoke up from her monitoring station. We're detecting something unusual in the human communication patterns. Define unusual, Quental ordered. They appear to be developing their own command structure parallel to Imperial hierarchy. Not in opposition to it, but supplementary to it. Morgeth highlighted specific data streams. When humans are assigned to operations in different sectors, they coordinate with each other regardless of official chain of command. Deputy Director Zorthak moved closer to the display. Are you saying they're building an independent military network within our own forces? Not exactly independent, Morgeth clarified. More like a shadow organization that operates in complete alignment with Imperial objectives, but with its own decision-making processes. Quental felt the familiar chill that seemed to accompany all intelligence reports about humanity. Show me the Kepler-7 incident analysis. The display changed to show the recent rebel suppression operation led by Captain Elena Vasquez. Traditional analysis showed a textbook small unit assault with exceptional execution, but the intelligence breakdown revealed something more complex. Captain Vasquez's squad wasn't operating in isolation, Morgeth explained. They were receiving real-time tactical support from Jake Morrison, who was on patrol 3 systems away. Morrison provided advanced reconnaissance using his fighter's sensor array and coordinated orbital strike patterns. 2 humans, different branches of service, different operational theaters, coordinating independently of command structure, Zorthak summarized. And it gets more interesting, Morgeth continued. During the assault, Vasquez made tactical decisions that seemed to anticipate enemy movements with impossible accuracy. Analysis suggests she was receiving intelligence from Lieutenant Chen Wei, a human communications specialist stationed at Sector Command. The implications became clear to everyone in the room simultaneously. The humans weren't just performing individual missions with exceptional skill. They were functioning as a distributed intelligence network that could coordinate complex operations across vast distances without official authorization. How many humans were involved? In the Kepler-7 operation? Quental asked. Officially? Vasquez and her 5-person squad, Morgeth replied. Unofficially? Our analysis suggests at least 12 humans across 4 different commands provided some form of support or coordination. Director Quental walked to the secure communication terminal and opened a priority channel to Imperial Command. This information needed to reach the highest levels immediately. Admiral Thexvar, this is Intelligence Director Quental. We need an emergency council session. What's the situation? Came the Admiral's immediate response. The humans aren't just individual assets anymore. They're operating as a collective intelligence network that spans our entire military structure. There was a long pause before Thexvar replied. Are they operating against Imperial interests? No, sir. That's what makes this so concerning. They're operating completely in support of Imperial objectives, but they're doing it through their own organizational methods. They've essentially created an independent command structure that happens to be perfectly aligned with our goals. For now, Thexvar said grimly. Within 2 hours, the Imperial Council had convened an emergency session. The intelligence briefing painted a picture that challenged every assumption about military integration and species loyalty. Chancellor Morgeth reviewed the data with his characteristic, methodical approach. If I understand correctly, humans are not simply following Imperial command structure. They are interpreting Imperial objectives and executing them through their own coordination methods. Exactly, Quental confirmed. They demonstrate perfect loyalty to Imperial goals, but they achieve those goals through processes we didn't authorize and don't fully control. Counselor Vexhai clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. This suggests a level of species-wide coordination that we've never encountered. How are they making decisions collectively? Dr. Zelmatar, who had been studying human psychology intensively since the first concerning reports, spoke up. Based on my research, humans may be operating through consensus-building mechanisms that evolved for pack hunting and tribal warfare. They can coordinate complex group actions without formal hierarchy. Elaborate, Chancellor Morgeth commanded. Humans appear to share a common framework for evaluating threats, opportunities, and appropriate responses. When faced with complex situations, they don't need detailed orders because they can independently arrive at similar tactical conclusions. Dr. Zelmtar paused. It's as if they have a shared strategic instinct. Admiral Thexvar leaned forward. Are you suggesting that humans can coordinate military operations through some form of biological telepathy? Not telepathy, but something almost as effective. They seem to share fundamental assumptions about how problems should be solved. Give 2 humans the same objective and similar resources, and they will independently develop nearly identical plans. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had not simply recruited human individuals. They had effectively absorbed a fragment of a species-wide military consciousness that operated by rules the Empire didn't understand. Counselor Rethnar voiced what many were thinking. If humans can coordinate independently of our command structure, what happens when their shared instincts conflict with Imperial orders? Based on current patterns, Quental replied, They would probably ignore Imperial orders and implement their own solution to the problem. And if we tried to enforce compliance through disciplinary action? Dr. Zelmtar answered this one. Then you would likely trigger their threat response protocols. Humans who perceive their decision-making authority as being compromised may interpret that as a hostile action. Chancellor Mordeth's telepathic voice carried new urgency. Are you telling us that we cannot control human personnel through traditional military discipline? I'm telling you that attempting to do so might convert our greatest assets into our greatest enemies, Dr. Zelmatar replied. Humans who believe they are being prevented from protecting Imperial citizens might conclude that their own command structure has become the threat. The council chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. They had sought to strengthen the Empire by integrating humanity's exceptional capabilities, but they had inadvertently created a situation where their most effective soldiers operated by principles that superseded Imperial authority. Director Quental summarized the strategic reality. We have 2,000 humans distributed throughout our military structure, each capable of extraordinary combat effectiveness, all connected through coordination methods we don't control, operating by moral principles we can't override. Chancellor Mordeth spoke the question that would determine the Empire's future. The critical issue is whether human principles will continue to align with Imperial interests, and what happens to the Empire if they don't. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning in the Outer Rim, when Governor Velthara of the Nexus colony made a decision that would test everything the Empire thought it knew about human loyalty. Jake Morrison was conducting routine patrol operations near the Nexus system when his communications array intercepted emergency transmissions from the colony's surface. The messages were fragmented and desperate, but the content was clear. Imperial forces were firing on civilian populations. Control. This is Morrison requesting clarification on Nexus colony operations, Jake transmitted to Sector Command. Morrison, you are not authorized for that information. Continue patrol route as assigned, came the response from Lieutenant Chen Wei, the human communications specialist who had been coordinating human operations across the sector. But Jake had worked with Chen for months. He knew the barely perceptible stress markers in her voice, the slight delay that meant she was being monitored, the formal language that indicated she was not speaking freely. Copy that, Control. Continuing patrol, Jake replied while simultaneously switching to an encrypted frequency that only humans used. Chen, what's really happening down there? Chen's response came through the secured channel moments later. Governor ordered pacification of civilian demonstrations. Imperial Guard units are using lethal force against unarmed protesters. Casualties estimated in the hundreds. Jake's hands tightened on his flight controls. Orders? Official orders are to maintain patrol route and avoid colony airspace. Chen's voice carried the weight of someone forced to deliver information she despised. Unofficial assessment. This is wrong and someone needs to stop it. Within minutes, the encrypted human network across the sector was alive with activity. Captain Elena Vasquez, stationed 2 systems away, confirmed that her intelligence sources showed similar operations planned for 3 other colonies. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, serving aboard the Imperial flagship, reported that the operations had been personally authorized by Governor Velthara as a demonstration of Imperial resolve. The picture that emerged was clear. Governor Velthara, a Kitharan noble with connections to the old aristocratic factions, had decided to crush growing independence movements through targeted brutality. The operations were technically legal under Imperial emergency powers, but they violated every principle that had convinced humans to join the Empire. Network consensus? Elena's voice came through the encrypted channel. The responses came quickly from humans across the sector. Unanimous agreement. The operations were morally unacceptable and had to be stopped. The fact that they were authorized by Imperial authority was irrelevant. Jake changed course toward Nexus Colony, his fighter accelerating beyond safety limits. Chen, patch me through to Governor Velthara. Jake, if you interfere with an authorized operation, then I'll face the consequences. But I won't let innocent people be slaughtered while I follow orders. The communication connection established, and Governor Velthara's voice filled Jake's cockpit. The governor's tone was arrogant, dismissive. Pilot Morrison, you are ordered to return to your patrol route immediately. Governor, I'm requesting that you cease fire against civilian populations and withdraw Imperial Guard units from the colony. You are requesting? Velthara's voice rose in anger. Human, you will follow orders or face court-martial for insubordination. Jake's response was calm, matter-of-fact. Governor, I'm not making a request as an Imperial pilot. I'm making a demand as a human being. Stop killing innocent people or I will stop you. You dare threaten a planetary governor? I will have you arrested for treason. Governor, with respect, you've made a tactical error. You've given me a direct order to allow the slaughter of civilians. I can't follow that order. I won't follow that order. And neither will any other human in Imperial service. As if to prove his point, Captain Elena Vasquez's voice cut into the channel. Governor, this is Captain Vasquez. I'm en route to Nexus Colony with my full company. We will arrive in 6 hours. Lieutenant Sarah Kim's voice followed. Governor, this is Communications Specialist Kim aboard the flagship. I've just transmitted all operational details regarding your pacification efforts to Imperial Command and the Galactic News Network. Governor Velthara's voice became shrill with rage. I will have every human in this sector executed for mutiny. No, sir, you won't, Jake replied, his fighter now entering Nexus Colony's atmosphere. Because in about 30 seconds, you're going to order your forces to stand down and withdraw. Not because I'm threatening you, but because you're about to discover what happens when humans decide that Imperial authority is being used to commit atrocities. Jake's fighter screamed over the colony's capital city, his sensors locking onto Imperial Guard positions that were firing on civilian crowds. His first missile strike disabled the Guard's command vehicle. His second destroyed their ammunition depot. His third took out their communications array. Attention Imperial Guard units, Jake broadcast on all frequencies. This is Pilot Morrison. You are ordered to cease fire and withdraw immediately. Any unit that continues attacking civilians will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. The response was immediate. Some Guard units, recognizing the futility of fighting a human pilot in atmospheric combat, began withdrawing. Others, following Governor Velthara's screamed orders to destroy the traitor, opened fire on Jake's fighter. What followed was not a battle, but a demonstration. Jake's fighter moved through the Guard positions like a scythe through wheat, destroying vehicles and equipment with surgical precision while carefully avoiding casualties. Within 20 minutes, the entire Imperial Guard force had been neutralized or had fled. Governor, Jake's voice came through every communication device in the system. Your forces have been defeated. The civilians are under my protection now. You have two choices. Acknowledge that this operation was illegal and order a full investigation, or explain to Imperial Command why one human pilot destroyed an entire Imperial Guard regiment. The silence stretched for several minutes before Governor Velthara's voice returned, now frightened and desperate. Morrison, you've committed treason against the Empire. You'll be hunted across the galaxy. No, sir, I haven't, Jake replied calmly. I've upheld the principles that the Empire claims to represent. The question is whether the Empire will stand by those principles or stand by corrupt officials who abuse their authority. As if summoned by his words, Admiral Thexvar's voice cut into the channel from Imperial Command. Governor Velthara, you are relieved of command pending investigation. Pilot Morrison, return to base for debriefing. Understood, Admiral, but I want to be clear about something. Jake's voice carried a new authority that made even the Admiral listen carefully. This wasn't an isolated incident of human insubordination. Every human in Imperial service was prepared to take the same action I took. We joined the Empire to protect innocent people, not to slaughter them. If Imperial authority is ever again used to harm civilians, every human in your military will respond the same way. The aftermath of the Nexus Colony incident sent shockwaves through Imperial Command. Governor Velthara was arrested and charged with war crimes. The civilian casualties were minimal thanks to Jake's intervention. But the political implications were staggering. Humans had demonstrated that they would defy Imperial authority when that authority conflicted with their moral principles. They had shown that they could coordinate resistance across vast distances and organizational boundaries. Most importantly, they had proven that their loyalty was not to the Empire as an institution, but to the principles they believed the Empire should represent. In the classified briefings that followed, Dr. Zelmatar's assessment proved prophetic. We are no longer dealing with subjects or even allies. We are dealing with partners who will judge our every action and respond accordingly. The Empire's greatest protectors have also become its conscience. The humans had passed their first test of allegiance, but in doing so, they had fundamentally changed the nature of Imperial power. The Empire now knew that its own military contained an autonomous moral authority that could not be overridden by political command. The question that haunted imperial leadership was simple. What would happen the next time human principles conflicted with imperial interests? And would the Empire be wise enough to ensure that such conflicts never arose again? 1 year after the Nexus colony incident, Chancellor Mordeth stood before the assembled Imperial Council in what would be remembered as the most significant session in the Empire's history. The ancient Etherian's form flickered with the weight of the decision that lay before them. "We have reached a crossroads." The Chancellor's telepathic voice resonated through every mind present. "The integration of humanity into Imperial forces has succeeded beyond our most optimistic projections, but it has also fundamentally altered the nature of our civilization." The statistics were undeniable. Human-led operations showed success rates approaching 98%. Piracy in sectors with human patrols had dropped to negligible levels. The Vorthan Rebellion, which had threatened the Empire's eastern territories for decades, had been completely eliminated in 8 months of human-coordinated campaigns. Military efficiency across all branches had improved dramatically as other species adopted human tactical innovations. But the costs were equally clear. Traditional imperial authority had been permanently compromised. Every major decision now required consideration of human moral approval. 3 more governors had been arrested following human interventions in cases of civilian abuse. The Empire's legendary bureaucratic machinery had been forced to become transparent and accountable in ways that made many administrators uncomfortable. Admiral Thexvar presented the military assessment. Human personnel now number over 5,000 across all branches. They have achieved complete tactical integration with non-human units while maintaining their independent coordination networks. From a purely military perspective, they represent the most significant force multiplier in galactic history. Dr. Zelmtar followed with the psychological evaluation. Human behavior patterns remain consistent with initial assessments. They demonstrate absolute loyalty to protective principles and complete intolerance for authoritarian abuse. Attempts to control them through traditional disciplinary methods have proven counterproductive and potentially dangerous. Intelligence Director Quental delivered the strategic summary. Humans have established what can only be described as a parallel command structure that operates in perfect coordination with Imperial objectives while remaining completely independent of Imperial control. They have become the Empire's conscience, whether we intended it or not. The debate that followed would last for hours. But the central question was simple. Could the Empire accept the permanent presence of an autonomous moral authority within its own structure? Councillor Vexhai voiced the concerns of the traditionalist faction. "We are essentially allowing a single species to dictate imperial policy through the threat of military action. This sets a dangerous precedent for other integrated species." "With respect," Admiral Thexvar replied, "no other species has demonstrated the capability to make such threats meaningful. Humans aren't dictating policy through superior force. They're enforcing moral standards through superior effectiveness." Councillor Rethnor raised another concern. What happens when human moral standards conflict with imperial strategic necessities? There may come a time when the survival of the Empire requires actions that humans would consider unacceptable. Dr. Zelmatar had studied this question extensively. Based on human historical patterns, they tend to redefine survival parameters rather than compromise moral principles. If faced with a choice between imperial survival through immoral means and imperial destruction through moral action, they would likely seek a third option that achieves both survival and moral integrity. And if no such option exists, then they would choose moral integrity and work to build something better from the consequences. The implications hung in the air like a storm cloud. The Empire faced a choice between accepting human moral oversight or losing the most effective military force in galactic history. Jake Morrison, now bearing the unofficial title of Human Liaison, had been invited to address the Council. His presence in the chamber represented something unprecedented, a representative of a species that could not be compelled to serve but chose to do so conditionally. "Councilors," Jake began, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had defined human interactions throughout the integration process. "I want to address the concerns about human loyalty and imperial sovereignty directly." He stood before beings who commanded fleets and governed star systems. yet spoke as an equal rather than a subordinate. Humans didn't join the Empire to serve imperial interests. We joined because imperial interests aligned with human values, protecting innocent people, maintaining justice, and enabling societies to grow and flourish. Jake paused, looking around the chamber. That alignment continues to exist, and so does human service. Chancellor Mordeth leaned forward. And if that alignment were to change, then humans would have to make the same choice we've always made throughout our history, Jake replied honestly. Stand with those who protect the innocent or stand against those who harm them. The Empire's challenge is to ensure that we never face that choice. Counselor Vexhai spoke up. Are you saying that human loyalty is permanently conditional? I'm saying that human loyalty is permanently earned, Jake corrected. You don't lose it through political changes or strategic disagreements. You lose it by betraying the principles that made it worth giving in the first place. And if the Empire were to attempt to remove human personnel from sensitive positions, Jake's answer came without hesitation, then you would discover that humans consider forced removal from protective duties to be an act of hostility against the people we're trying to protect. The chamber fell silent. The message was clear. The Empire could not control human personnel through traditional means, and attempts to do so would likely trigger the very resistance they feared. Chancellor Mordeth made the decision that would define the Empire's future. The Empire will formally recognize the human moral authority as an autonomous institution within imperial structure. Human personnel will continue to serve under imperial command, but with acknowledged authority to intervene in cases of civilian harm or institutional corruption. The vote was closer than it should have been, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Empire's survival depended on human capabilities, and human capabilities came with non-negotiable moral requirements. Dr. Zelmtar would later write in his classified analysis, the Empire has not simply integrated a new species. It has undergone a fundamental evolution. Imperial power is no longer based solely on military strength and political authority, but on moral legitimacy as judged by beings who cannot be corrupted, intimidated, or controlled. In the months that followed, the transformation became apparent throughout imperial space. Corruption rates plummeted as officials realized that human oversight was both constant and incorruptible. Military efficiency continued to improve as human tactical methods were adopted across all species. Most significantly, civilian satisfaction with imperial governance reached historically unprecedented levels. The Empire had gained more than exceptional soldiers. It had gained the ultimate accountability mechanism. Human personnel served as both protectors and judges, ensuring that imperial power was used in ways that justified its existence. Jake Morrison's final report to Imperial Command summarized the new reality. Humans are not your subjects, your allies or your servants. We are your partners in building something worthy of protection. As long as the Empire remains something worth protecting, you will have our complete loyalty. The day it becomes something that needs to be stopped, you will have our complete opposition. The choice, as always, is yours. The Galactic Empire had embraced a human pilot for his exceptional skills, but in doing so, they had discovered something far more valuable and far more dangerous than mere tactical ability. They had found a species that could not be controlled, only earned. A species that would serve any cause worthy of service and oppose any authority unworthy of power. The Empire's greatest strength had become its greatest judge. And for the first time in its long history, imperial power was genuinely accountable to the principles it claimed to represent. The humans had not conquered the Empire. They had simply made it impossible for the Empire to conquer itself.